All right, we are calling this meeting to order. The time is currently 4:30. Welcome to everyone. This is the February 10th board meeting or board work session meeting. We're going to do a quick roll call. If we can start down on the left, Director Larson.
Dave Larson, Director, District 5.
Terrence Crocker, Director of District 4.
Dr. Hans Pedrosa, Superintendent.
Director Mitch Forehand, District 1.
And Greg Sherlock, Director of District 2.
Aiden Halleck, Senior Student Representative.
Perfect. And thank you to all the guests that are in attendance.
And
Oh, we do have one more. Apologies.
Arden Russell, sophomore student rep.
Perfect.
And Director Pat Dunn.
And we have Director Papion on Zoom. All right, so getting into our approval agenda, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. So we can get directly into discussion items, correct? Or
There was an announcement.
oh, sorry, apologies. I forgot. Before we get into our agenda items, I would like to defer to Director Larson for a quick recognition.
Yeah, I just want to recognize the fact that Foster High School is going to be the hosting the girls and boys basketball district tournament this coming up this it'll be the 14th, the 16th, and 18th. That's Saturday, Monday, and Wednesday for both. This is a 2A District 2 tournament. So two teams from this tournament will be going to the state finals in Yakima at the end of the month, and both the boys and the girls teams will be in this tournament as well. There's kind of preliminary games, so the Foster boys will be playing actually tonight at 7 o'clock up at Foster, and the girls will be playing at 7 o'clock up at Cleveland High School as a kind of preliminary for this tournament. So this doesn't happen all that often, and so the boys, I think, are currently ranked 18th out of 62 teams in the 2A division of the state. The girls are 43rd, so girls may have a little bit of a challenge, but it'll be fun. We'll have a lot of good basketball going all day up there. So if you want to watch some good 2A basketball, go and check them out in the 14th, 16th, and 18th. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you, Director Larson. Okay, now we'll get into our discussion. We have a school improvement plan for Tukwila Elementary.
Hi there,
Hello.
my name is Penny. I'm the principal at Tukwila Elementary. And then I have some of my school members back over there as well. Before we get into our presentation, I always kind of like to just give you a picture of who is at Tukwila before you get into data, so you kind of have an idea of who's reflected in the data. So welcome to Tukwila Elementary, home of the best and the brightest. For some of you, you haven't been there, but for others, it's been too long. A lot has changed this last year, and a lot has changed. Here at Tukwila Elementary, we are a community. We are thinkers and builders. We are songwriters and singers. We are engaged learners. We know routines and expectations. We are thoughtful thinkers. And we are creative collaborators. We are respectful and responsible. We celebrate fun times. We take learning into the real world. We celebrate and honor those who have served. We are fortunate enough to get free coats for every child this year and we're thankful to Operation Norm. And we had a great time. We can confidently say we are one. We celebrate each other. And we had a blast from the past. Welcome back, Principal Fane. And lastly, if you ever come through the office, you can see us chilling with this. And then this is a little production that our school used TTN students put together. You don't have to play the whole video for time's sake, but to give you an idea of all the effort and work that they put into findings every single month.
Of that reason.
If you want to stop there.
Okay.
So the rest just goes on to tell you more about the different things that we do, and a lot of it is student driven. So we have our third graders, our fourth graders that are really the primary ones that are learning how to do it. They do it every single morning with the help of our STEAM teacher. And at a certain point, they become independent. So the STEAM teachers are to support them, but they continue the production. So a little bit more about our school, just to share the breakdown of the demographics. And this number, I'm pretty confident, has slightly gone down because it's from a little bit back. But between our Gen Ed students and our preschoolers, we're about 419 students. And that's also the makeup of girls and boys, our ethnicity makeup. On the next page, also kind of breaks down what else we have. We have 42% of our students are ML speakers. We are a 67% at low income, which year after year, we're slightly going down. And the rest is just kind of telling us a breakdown of our homeless, our highly capable, just things that you can take, you know, and the different demographics at our school. And then breaking down our ML students, taking out the preschool, we have 375 students, which again, that number changes. It fluctuates up and down based on enrollment. But of that 375, we originally had 172 are ML students. And then the other parts is the listening, the reading, the speaking, and the writing breakdown of our WIDA scores. And our biggest area that we're seeing a need for is writing and reading, but we've also emphasized speaking as one of those that helps lead into the others. If you look at this one, it's a breakdown of, out of the 172 ML students that are identified, our biggest chunk of students are L1, entering, newcomers, and L2, emerging. So that's after they've been here a little bit and they're showing progress. And for us, that's where we emphasized a lot of our supports going towards and working on reshaping our model to ensure that they are properly served. And then if you look at to exit, you need, sorry, it's okay. So for K1, it's a little bit easier for them to exit ML. We just need a scale of 4, but once they're from second to 5th grade, it's a little bit more difficult. They need a 4.7 to exit. And sometimes what we've seen is students that are showing great success in the classroom when they take the ML with the ML teacher or whoever is doing the assessment, it doesn't always translate. And sometimes it ends up that they score way lower than we believe they're capable of doing other work. But unfortunately, we have to take what the test says over what we think they're capable of.
it's true that writing is always, I mean, it's not just for our MLS, it's for everybody. That's kind of the last one that gets. And I'm just kind of curious, do you feel like, got a good curriculum for that particular area? Since that's probably the biggest challenge area.
We put more emphasis into trying to get a curriculum aligned. So last year we started with writing without tears. And we did it for K1. And then this year we moved it up to K1 too, because writing, you're right outside of even WIDA, we just saw that we needed a curriculum to help support. And then with the upper grades, we used mystery writing, which we saw a lot of teachers finding success in the upper grades. And then now we have a separation of K2 uses writing without tears, and then 3-5 is using mystery writing. And we can't say what we've seen the production of what that, but we have more consistent now across the board of writing curriculum that's in use. Our highly capable model is a cluster grouping. So at every grade level, we have one highly capable teacher. If we have too many students, if it surpasses 6 students, then what we end up doing is we end up with 2 highly capable classrooms within that grade to make sure we're following the model. Our ML model is a work in progress right now, but what we have is a little bit different than what we used to have. Currently, we have 1 full-time ML teacher, and we share a second ML teacher because of our numbers with Thorndike and 1 ESP. Our shared ML teacher we use as a coach. So the days that she is in our building is 2 days, and then every other Wednesday. So she supports teachers in lab strategies and supporting the ML students and providing ways of getting access to curriculum. Our ML teacher and our ML ESP right now are following a rotation model similar to our specialist. She's co-teaching or station teaching. So co-teaching is when she teaches along with the teacher. And the station teaching is almost a push-in model where the teacher pulls a group and the ML teacher is also pulling a group. And then the same with the ESP, she's also pushing into the classroom to pull a small group to support those ML students. Interventions is a little bit different this year as well as last year. We had interventions teachers supporting this, but now we have only ESP supporting this and the classroom teachers. At this, last year, we tried to do it where we integrated the ESPs into instructional time to give support to the teachers. But this year we did a specific time, so chunked out 30 minutes within the schedule to make sure that that time is specifically used for ML. And the way it's being served is the ESPs, our educational support staff. They serve the students that are closer to grade level, where the classroom teachers are serving students that are lower, below grade level. So our reading goals. Our goal for reading was focused on comprehension. And the reason why we selected comprehension is when we looked at our iReady scores, it showed that comprehension was the area that we needed the most growth. Our goal is to move the percentage of at or above grade level that currently sits at 28% to 48%. And then a more specific focus on our ML students to move from 13%, which is where they're sitting at right now, to 30%. Right now, our winter data shows that for our whole school, we started at 28%, but we are at 39%. And then the goal is to be at 48% by the end of the year. So we're seeing 39% growth already. And then our ML students that started at 13%, we see that during the winter data, they're at 20%, which shows that they've grown about 82%. Our hope and our goal is we are going to achieve this goal, but also we recognize that winter data sometimes shows us data that they fall back or they stay stagnant, but sometimes we also see that the data goes up slightly. This is, our goal is not specifically tied to typical or growth goal. It's focused on comprehension within iReady. However, just for us to also keep an eye on how we're doing on stretch growth and typical growth. Within iReady, all of our students are showing that they're at 36% in typical growth. And this is not just comprehension, this is all of iReady. So this is all of iReady readings. Our whole school is showing that we are at 36% typical growth, and then we are at 13% stretch growth. And I believe, I can be wrong, but that means 36% of the students have achieved their typical growth, and then 13% of students have achieved their stretch growth. And then the same for our ML students, they're showing us that 33% of them have achieved their typical growth, and that 10% of them have achieved their stretch growth. And then the difference is it's a lot easier to achieve typical growth than it is to achieve stretch growth, because stretch growth wants you to get as close to grade level for you as possible, where typical growth is a manageable amount of growth that I already want you to make in order to keep moving towards making your stretch.
Yeah, so typical, a somewhat simplified way of thinking about it, typical growth is usually like one grade level, which is the typical, whereas stretch growth could be growing faster than
Yeah.
one grade level, which our students need to be able to get
Yeah.
there. It may not happen in 1 year, but 2 or 3 years
Yeah.
of stretch growth, they'll get you there.
Yeah, and then like a really good example is earlier today when I was at Dr. Farmstead, there's a fifth grader that, or not a fifth grader, sorry, third grader that was at kindergarten that made it to first grade, which is great, but he had to grow by 92 points. And that only got him to first grade. So it's a big stretch to get to your stretch growth. And then this is just historical data. A lot of it touches into last year. It doesn't necessarily go into the data that we are looking at this year, but it was just historical data for you to look at. And then along with our reading goals, we also just wanted to share where we were with SBA last year, because SBA scores for this year are coming down the pipeline. So our third graders last year did a passing rate of 47%. Our fourth graders passed at 34%, and our fifth graders passed at 47%. And that's the amount of students at each grade level. And this next slide just kind of compares our passing score to the state as well as the district. And we're really proud to say that we might not be where we want to be, but we are continuing to grow to make sure that we're aligning with state. And then based on the data that we have right now from our SIP goal and what we've done with literacy throughout the year, some strengths that I really want to highlight is we put a lot of emphasis and strengths into PLC practices, and this year has been the year where it's showing up consistently once a week grade levels meet. And then with me and our instructional coach, they also meet with us once a month to just kind of review data, whether it's intervention related, classroom support related, coaching related.
Honey, can you explain what a PLC is?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I just want to make sure that when we say an acronym, we
Yes.
explain it to the board.
PLCs are grade levels have meetings, and that is professional learning communities. So they meet once a week to kind of review what's going on in their grade level, whether that's a data review, grade level meetings. And this year we've been more intentional. This is our fourth year working on PLCs, and we have a PLC template. We have a focus on what we need to talk about, and then during our meeting, it's just a quick check-in of how are we in terms of accountability of doing your PLCs and then what needs they have. And our instructional coach plays a big role in supporting grade levels with that. We have strong instructional practices that we've just been working on the past couple of years, and a part of that is our ML, strengthening inclusionary practices, pushing into the classroom, utilizing UDL, Universal Design Instruction. So a lot of it is just learning strategies and tools to give access to students while they're in the classroom at tier 1 where they are, rather than pulling them out and taking them to other places, but finding ways for them to access the material and the curriculum in front of them. And then, can you go back? I'm sorry. And then the last one, most grade levels are aligned. And what I mean by that is this year, we also have a lot of change in staff. So it's almost like, yes, we're in a good place, but then it's like a rubber band where now that we have new people, we got to get the new people on board, ensure that, you know, they're following the same guidelines they're following the sequence, and we're seeing a lot of consistency, but you know, there's always room for growth, and there's some grade levels that we're working on alignment in the true sense, not in just, you know, saying alignment and hoping people do it. Some areas of weakness and growth that we need to work on is solidifying our ML model, strengthening our data dives, And what that practice looks like in PLC, having full and consistent alignment across grade levels, supporting new staff, student support, so small groups, interventions, making that more of an airtight space so that we can use it as that second layer, tier 2 support within our school. And then for next steps, to keep working in the space is to collaborate with our leadership team and identify and implement an ML model that best serves our school's needs, which has changed from year to year. And then building and implementing the data dive protocol that we can actually use and benefit from. And then build full and consistent alignment of materials and instructions across grade plans. And those are always things that we're in constant motion.
Yeah, I think there's lots of evidence in our district in the past and in the literature that, you know, highly effective grade level teams are really important because, you know, I mean, when you're sharing what works across the class, that can make a huge difference. I mean, they need to be operating effectively, but that's still the way to go.
For math, so our civic goal this year for math. When we looked at our first round of data, we noticed that numbers and operations was the area that needed the most growth in math. So our goal is by June 2026 to go from the 17% of students that are at or above grade level and hopefully gain 37% by the end of the, or get them to 37% by the end of the year, and that's whole school. But more specifically for our ML students, we're noticing there's only 9% of our students that are at or above grade level, so we want to push that number up to 29%. And I'll be honest, I always look for a goal that's achievable rather than a goal that we set really high, 90, 80, 100%, and we know we're not going to fully achieve it. But what we find is usually we'll surpass that 37% or we'll surpass that 29%, but it is an achievable goal. Right now, our winter data is showing us that we went from 17% to 33% in our math growth. And then we went from 9%, and that's whole school, and then we went from 9% to 19% for our ML students. So we're already seeing strong growth.
So I'm curious about this. So when I compare math to reading, so math is considerably lower at the start point. And I'm wondering about, I think it's true that summer learning loss hits math a lot harder than it does reading, which is why the fall score is so low. You're reteaching things that were in and it moves up. So there's a lot of growth in terms of fall to winter, but a lot of just making up what they forgot with it, which ties into, I'm curious if we ever could get some data about our students, because I know in our summer school, there was an emphasis on math. And so if we can tie the students who actually took summer school and see where they are in math when they start in comparison to those that didn't, I think that would start to make some strong case for, particularly the summer school and math, because that's the one that's, math is always a bit of a, you lose more if you don't use it.
And it'll be interesting this year because summer school is going to be all day, so we haven't done that before.
Yeah.
There's an enrichment component, but it'll be an all day program, so that'll be also interesting for us to collect data on.
And then this is for us to just also keep track of where we are with typical and stretch, and currently whole school for typical, we are at 19%. And for stretch growth, we are at 5%, which is also almost identical to last year this time. And for our ML students, which I really want to say, it says something that our ML students are not different in this space, which means we don't have to worry about catching them up to where we are. We're showing that they are also at 19% for typical growth, but we are at 3% for stretch growth. So the gap is not that wide between our ML students and then our whole student body. Then again, this is for historical data context, just for you to see what the numbers look like previous year. However, I believe these are beginning and ending, not beginning and middle. And then to also give you an idea of what our SBA scores look like last year, our third graders passed at 43%, rate. Our fourth graders passed at 40% and our fifth graders passed at 30%. And then the number again of students is right.
So was last year, were they using the new math curriculum?
They were.
Okay, so it's year one of the new math curriculum? Okay.
And then this is kind of the same with the literacy, showing you comparison to district data, state data. And again, we really are proud of where we are and we really just want to keep growing. And that takes a lot of work in our space and figuring out what we need to do. And for math, kind of similar to a lot of our practices that we do with literacy, just transpire into math. Consistent PLC practices have been one of like our greatest areas of connection, communication, and moving a lot of our values and practices forward. Strong instructional practices, especially with math. And now that we have a curriculum, we have a place where it's more aligned. There is no disalignment with math because everybody uses the same materials. It's just now strengthening it and making it more robust and doing it with fidelity. Aligned with instruction and materials and a consistent shared curriculum has been a great strength. And our weaknesses in the area of growth is also kind of similar. ML leads into literacy and math. And we've really been trying to figure out like how can we strengthen our ML practices in math because it also requires a lot of reading. And it also requires a lot of conversation. I think you always align ML with literacy and writing, and we don't think that math is the area that we need to do things with. So that's an area we're trying to figure out. And the rest is kind of the same, strengthening our data dive, forwarding consistent alignment across grade levels, supporting these staffs and the staff support for small groups and interventions. And then next steps for this one is also kind of the same. The leadership team this year has been, in my opinion, I would say we've really taken advantage of being more intentional and taken on a role where we're really dissecting the data within our school. And then as a team, pushing out what we need to do for the school rather than just, being singular to one space. So just continuing to grow that practice, especially with a focus on what should our ML model look like moving forward. And then building and implementing data dive, I think that one would be really critical in just analyzing the data that we have, but not analyzing it during these big times of big I-ready, but also during the different times within the school so that we can catch things and follow up immediately. And then building math talk and differentiation strategies. Like I said, kind of math is, we put so much emphasis on literacy and writing. Sometimes I think we forget math and it kind of shows in our scores like moving up as much as we see literacy moving up. So that's definitely something that we kind of want to unpack what's happening with our math and what can we do to better support.
That's really important too, because math is kind of switching from, it used to be all just calculations and repeat calculations over and over again. You could spend a long time working out how to do long division and things like that, which is now becoming kind of irrelevant because you just, but what is important is how to use it and understanding the depth behind it, which is what this, you're talking about math talk and differentiation. That's the really important thing it's changing, and the SBA has changed in terms of just doing, calculations and to more, word problems and so forth. So I think that's really important to point out.
Our discipline. So our data, we were really proud of our building last year. We took a lot of our referrals, I think it was 200 and something, I don't remember off the top of my head. And we ended the year with 110 referrals. So our goal this year, honestly, was either keep it at 110 referrals or be more, be more enthusiastic and hope to continue to reduce the referrals to 88 possibly or fewer referrals. And these are just minors. These are the ones that show up in Swiss, not majors. So last year we ended it with 110. Our end goal for this year, we hope would be 88, but also stressing to staff that doesn't mean you stop writing referrals where we're not trying to, change the system or rig it to make it look different. We encourage writing referral, but also we have a process of make sure we're doing all these steps before getting to the referral so that by the time a referral is written, you have all this conclusive data of I've talked to them, I've had conversations, this is repetitive, We've engaged with families, or even before engaging with families, it's repetitive. Now let's handle it at a different level. Currently, right now, we are at 41. And then the same time last year, which is still positive, we were at 53. And then the rest of this is kind of showing you a breakdown of our SWIS data. Again, only minors, not majors. In September, which is our non-referral writing month, mainly to just get to know the students, to understand what's going on, to build those relationships, build those routines. But we did have an incident that happened, and we want to make sure we're also documenting. In October, we had 21, and that's also typical. Usually October is 40 referrals or more, so I'm really proud to see that our referrals are reducing, but it's also a high month. At that point, kids are comfortable. At that point, they feel safe, and things happen, and they're back in school, and they're trying and seeing what's acceptable and what's not. November, we had lower than usual. We only had 1 referral. In December, we had 7. In January, we had 10. And in February, we had. Actually, I lied. There's 2 more on my desk.
We have 3, and February's not over.
And it's not over.
But it's kind of coming up, so there we go.
The biggest one that we see, which again is also typical, is physical. And I know it says physical contact, but for us, physical contact is pushing, shoving. If it was a full-on brawl and a fist fight, it wouldn't be in here. It would be as a major in SWIS. So it's a lot of kids not understanding, get your behavior out differently. First thing is physical contact towards another. Disrespect and disruption came in at 12%. Referrals by location, again, our biggest area is recess. There's only 2 adults that are monitoring 6 classes. More of us go out there from time to time, but a lot of it is just managing, playing the game. Soccer is a big one. You can't see it in here, but a lot of it is brawls that happen at soccer that are just frustrations, and the frustrations lead to shoving matches. And the classroom is coming close at 17%, and then the gym is 12%. And the gym also includes, just so I can clarify, in the morning as well, because we have morning recess, but sometimes when it rains, we also have kids that are in the gym. Our typical time is 12 p.m. That is the end of first kindergarten recess, the beginning of second, third recess. And then by student, so we have out of the 41 referrals, 4 students take up 18 out of those 41 referrals. So student A had 8 referrals, student B 4 referrals, student C 3, student D 3 also, and then the rest are random students, but these are the students that have the most referrals repeatedly. Day of the week, I was honestly surprised at that Wednesday, because I think typically we used to have Wednesdays and Fridays be our referral days, but we had Thursday this year, 34%, Friday 19%, Monday 19%, but I also wondered if it was Thursday, because now we have the Smart Wednesdays that we leave a little early, that kind of changes up the kid system, and then they come back. And then referrals by grade, kindergarten is the highest, 24%, second grade is the next highest, and first grade, which is a complete flip and different than what we used to have the past couple of years. It used to be our 4th and 5th graders that were constantly showing up, so I actually appreciate this more.
Yeah, I was gonna say that you can interpret that as, they're getting properly trained in the other grades, so they don't. And particularly the physical front is much more dangerous at the higher grades than the lower grades. So I don't know, I look at that and I say that's probably a good thing. I mean,
I would agree. And they're just learning. A lot of it is they're new to school. They're learning. They don't know how to engage. It makes more sense for the data to look like that than the flip, which is better, but you're repeating all the time. And then this one is our students by race and ethnicity, and then our if you go to the next one, it has more data, because this one kind of shows you the highest students. So you'll see that our highest students that are receiving referrals are our white students. We have a total of 57 in the school, 14% of the 8 students, though, who were referred out of, Out of the 57 students, 2 students contributed a total of 12 referrals combined. 1 student had 4 and 1 student had 8, so it kind of skewed the referral data and it made it look higher. One race got way higher than the other, but in reality, it was 2 specific students that really both had high needs and special education needs that we ended up finding other alternatives. Our multiracial students showed that they had the second our Hispanic and Latino students had the second highest. Our multiracial students had the third highest, and our African American students had the least amount of referrals.
Another kind of good news is these are relatively small numbers. So that's good.
Yes, would agree. Strengths, the biggest thing that I feel like worked is character strong assemblies. We try to recognize 1 student, but I'm really proud of the teachers that a lot of times 2, 3 students get recognized in the month for showing the character trait of the month. We also use character strong as a curriculum. We had tier 2, but this year we are sticking to just tier 1 to see how that builds up in the community. If financially we're able to, we'll try tier 2 again. Morning meetings was a big one last year. Our schedule kind of changed a little bit. However, I've seen more teachers that are using whether it's morning meeting times or check-in throughout the day to have conversation with their students about what's happened. There's a focus and an emphasis building wide on tier 1 support. So at the beginning of the year, we review expectations and behaviors. We review it when we come back from big breaks throughout the year. If there's something that's spiking up, I send emails to just kind of point out to people, hey, this is what's going on. We have a what would you do section. I didn't add that on here during our staff meeting. They just kind of put information from a referral and then staff kind of get to unpack what happened and share out their ideas on how to solve it, which allows the community to hear how we're solving the problems instead of just we solve our own problems. Family communication and connection has been a big emphasis. We don't want them to hear from me first. I would prefer that they hear from the teachers because then it kind of dies down the big frustration that they feel of my child is in trouble. And then in our leadership meeting, I wouldn't say monthly, but we have bi-monthly PBIS leadership space where we unpack referral data and then we move forward with a suggestion on the highest need area. What we would like.
PBIS means.
Sorry.
It's okay. No, that's okay. It's okay to forget. That's time to make sure that the word has
Positive behavior intervention. Yeah, positive behavior intervention support. So it's kind of like be respectful, be responsible, be safe. And then what can we do, like building up routine behaviors and expectation, having a team that disaggregates the data, shares out the follow-up on the data. And just like our building wide, we know this tier 1 is where all the emphasis needs to be, because if we're putting out fires constantly, it means our tier 1 is not solid. So that's where our biggest focus has been. Where we would like to grow is continuing to build now that we feel like we're in a good place for tier 1, but we could always grow. Tier 2 and tier 3 is our focus, like what can we do better to support the students that are repeating the same behaviors over and over. More consistent use of character strong across the building, building proactive problem-solving lessons for all grade levels. A lot of our students think this is the only step they can take and they could benefit from other strategies. And then our stretch, I think that kind of refers to don't have a social emotional interventionist. So a lot of it is just depending on one person to solve all the problems or one person plus another person pulling from multiple places to solve the issues. Where if you had a system of different people playing different roles, it would be a little bit easier. And then next steps is to continue strengthening our tier 1 supports, build and grow our tier 2 supports, build preventative strategies and tools for our students.
So I'm wondering, so the one that I asked for that you didn't do was breakdown by gender and not a big surprise, the boys way out to the girls themselves. And I know that's true at every elementary school and also when you talk about it happens at recess and it's outside. Are there any strategies? I know that you particularly targeted toward boys. Boys at that age have a lot of energy that needs to get out. And sometimes it doesn't get out in the ways.
Many of our referrals are team building, collaboration, or just relationship to one another issues. What we try to do is we just keep having conversations with them. I know soccer is our biggest thing right now. every recess, we have the same soccer issues, so we're trying different things, like maybe it's a contract, you have to sign it, it's restorative practice. I don't know that I've seen one thing work over the other, it's a lot of competitive sports is what you see, and it's a lot of, I think right now, it's just the energy of FIFA coming to our state, kids thinking, this is the big leagues and they want to be a part of it and they're overjoyed and excited and just not learning how to bring that excitement back to ground level. So, but what we do is we keep revisiting, and sometimes it works and sometimes it's the minute you take that next step, it slows them down for a bit and then it picks back up. And then we wait a little bit because we don't want to jump to big consequences. And that's the other thing, really proud and happy to say we haven't had any exclusions or suspensions yet. Please don't come away. Because sometimes when you speak into it, it happens right away. But we haven't had that, and we've seen a lot of repetitive behavior, but we haven't seen a lot of violent, outrageous, big repetitive behaviors that we used to. So that's where I'm trying to figure out, like, what can the next thing look like in building proactive problem-solving strategies that are tools that we all collectively know in the building and that we can reference so that I'm not pulling you every time having this conversation with you, but you already have tools before I pull you, so the conversation can sound a little different.
So unfortunately, we're kind of dealing with a world where the pros aren't exactly creating exemplary examples for our students sometimes, it's pushing against that, and then social media is flaring that up. So anyway, yeah, it sounds like it's an ongoing challenge.
And I'd be interested to hear, because you gave comparison that the major referrals would be somewhere else, so.
Yeah.
At recess, we're playing soccer, what does a not major referral look like? Like, he and I went out, or ball went off my head the wrong way, we're on the same team, we're opponents, what?
For us, so a major would be like physical contact, a brawl. But for this, it's more like I kick the soccer ball, it ain't go into the field, I'm mad at you, start pushing back and forth. It doesn't escalate to a big fight, but we start pushing back and forth, and then we're still elevated. So what we'll see is like soccer, they'll play their soccer, someone made the wrong shot, made the wrong call a foul, we didn't agree on that foul, we started pushing match. A lot of our students are good about separating before an adult can get there. And then we talk, we solve it, we think the problem is solved, and then it's time to line up. And it carries it to
That's the part I want to hear.
it carries it to the line, so now it starts back up and they're elevating. And a lot of times what happens is like graduate luncheon, let's talk, what happened, let's unpack. They'll solve it, you think it's good, 2-3 days later, it works, here we are again. And then what we ended up doing with some of them is alternative soccer, sorry, you can't play together, it's not working anymore. Or we try switching them to a different game, same behavior. You're playing, you're competitive, he did this, he did that, and then that's where we level it up and take it to the parents. But we've been fortunate so far that it hasn't gotten to the point where it's big physical altercations, which was a norm the last couple of years, where they're physically brawling. Now it's kind of like, they know not to get to the point of a brawl, but they're willing to push the boundaries enough to get close to the brawl. So it's almost like, I got you, but you didn't really get me, Miss Nerd, because I didn't really hit him. I only did, the bare minimum to what would have led to. So that's, which is good, because that means they're wising up and they're smartening up, and it's not stopping the repetitive fights and arguments and cursing and cussing.
Oh.
Another big one where you're like, okay, but you knew not to say that. Why'd you say it? I was really mad. I was really frustrated. And it's just, yeah.
So another strategy, and it's been tried before, and I don't know if we heard back actually how successful is peer mediators.
Yeah.
Because obviously the adults can't be everywhere all the time, but the students can, and so, I don't know, it's another, like I said, I know Thorndike has tried it, but how successful it was, I don't know.
I wouldn't try it with the group I have right now. I think it would cause more harm than it would help. I think there's other kids it would work with, but right now, the group that we have is almost like sibling rivalry. Like they're best friends one day, not best friends the next day.
Or wait till they get to show off, they're gonna be best friends for the day. No, they're gonna turn into best friends. That's the dynamic,
Yeah.
right? And then we can give them some emotional regulation.
Yeah.
at the elementary school, because that's the dynamic I'm going to be.
Yeah.
Class athletic, if it's athletic, and they'll end up setting the hierarchy and becoming best of friends and in each other's weddings as they get older. It's a unique
But you
dynamic.
did make me motivated. I just want to send an email to my contact at the Southeast Chamber, because I'm on
Yeah.
their advisory group, asking if they had a contact for FIFA. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
My,
Lose their mind.
my mind was racing because I may have some of that, because some of it, if you see the same happening around the same way, it's actually can be harnessed different.
Yeah.
Cause as much as we gotta help them regulate, but helping elementary students emotionally self-regulate, like, we can all be rich, we can figure that out. But it's part of the process, but athletics and competitive sports can play a very, very valuable role in that. It's just, they're gonna be intentional and find out, okay, we figured out what don't work, but there's some things that will work. And a shift in, I love, do your report, love to talk to you more. I got some folks that might can help, if we can help.
In just one sec, Director Shaw, did you have?
Oh, no, you cut it. I was interested on the peer oversight as well too. I've seen that been successful. Maybe like a sixth grader, maybe you have 3 or 4 boys like at each different game.
Yeah.
And that just isn't working in your situation.
Well, for us, we don't have the above, so our 4th and our 5th graders are where the majority of the issues are happening.
Okay.
And it's happening in tangent. So there's no separation. We had to separate 4th grade soccer, 5th grade soccer, because it wasn't working when they were collective.
Yeah, buddy.
So I wouldn't say completely, I wouldn't rule it out to say it might possibly work. It just, their feelings are so high on each other. And then it's also, when it's their turn not to play, they're standing on the sideline, watching the other grade playing, staying, all kinds of things. So that dynamic is not fully there.
Well,
If you can get it there.
I guess peer mediation, I think you're right. I mean, because I've seen peer mediation when kids have tried to intervene in a really aggressive game.
Yeah.
And it's actually caused more harm to the kids who are actually trying to peer mediate.
Yeah.
Peer mediation works at lower level incidences, but you have to train everybody and it has to be pretty carefully thought out. So there's just some things. It's not, I think you're right in thinking like we could look into it, but I think thinking through who they can mediate will be critical, because I've seen it go sideways many times.
Yeah, I think it depends on, it can get really tricky depending on who's stepping in and who's,
Yeah.
and all that gets really
Well,
complicated.
depending on who's needing stepping in on it.
And who, when, and how.
Yeah. Right.
And we've also discussed, getting that energy out. So something that used to happen for us was, if we got into a brawl between teammates at the baseball for Foster, is now you gotta take a lap. Is that type of thing going on, or is it just kind of a referral talking to and then?
We, a lot of it doesn't get to a referral. A referral would be, you're not able to solve it with us.
Yes.
We're trying to solve it together. You're not able to solve it with us and you're continuing to escalate. Now we have to level it up.
Yeah.
A lot of times we can diffuse it,
Yeah.
but no, we haven't used a strategy. We would need more bodies of someone monitoring that kind of system. But I think Mr. Duffy was upon had something where at recess they ran, so I think.
remember doing that too. We were running around the baseball field. Or cheap ball field at the time.
And the game's going on.
Yeah, now I gotta watch it.
Is there a comment? From, Director Papian, you have a comment? Okay.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I was curious to also know possibly what type of action is taken for like the repeated offenders. If you just mentioned no referrals, usually don't scale up to that level, but would be curious to learn more about it.
We have progressive discipline, so a lot of our referrals are minor. They haven't led to a major yet. So it would be restorative practice, trying to solve the problem at the base level. And then if that doesn't work and it's repeated, then it's a consequence of, phone call home, talk to parents, alternative recess. If it's not workable that you're at your recess and we find a different time. Another thing that we do, but we haven't gotten to, because again, it hasn't reached that point, is we have after school detention. But again, we haven't seen kids to the extent where you've done something so big that we have to send you to after school detention before we do an expulsion. So a lot of it is just infighting, not major fighting, like little repetitive infighting, sometimes not even worthy of a referral, but it's kind of like, talked about this yesterday, talked about it the day before, but you're not doing anything so bad that I can remove you. So it's just trying to find a unique way to solve the issue. And right now where we're at is everybody has to sign a contract on how they were going to play with sportsmanship out at soccer. And if they don't follow through, then that means they don't get that soccer time. They gotta find something else to do at recess.
Perfect. Thank you.
And it could be something, because if it happens like in soccer, basketball, whatever the case is, it could be something, because you need those things.
Yeah.
But it could be something as simple or penalty points. You're pulled out, the other team's kicking point. Nobody wants that in the game. Because remember, it's rooted in this dynamic. But
Yeah.
carry on with your report. I loved it. Hell, I can't. I just get out of here myself.
It sounds like a yellow card, right?
But some things understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, for opportunities that we've had this year is collaborating with students to continue to improve and grow discipline practices. And one thing last year's fifth graders brought up that just haven't had the time to do it, student government. I just need to figure out what that looks like at elementary level, and then to the extent of what to do with the student government when we do form it. A lot of the fifth graders are really excited about it this year, and they've been asking, and one of our teachers, Ms. Bautista, kind of started that conversation with the students. So I'm currently trying to figure out how to bring it in and what it could look like and how it would serve to help, because a lot of our students are outspoken. A lot of them will advocate for each other, and sometimes it's them saying they're upset about what a teacher did or this teacher did that and trying to resolve the issue. But also accountability goes both ways, and just explaining to them like this is what happened to cause the situation. So that's one thing I'm trying to figure out what it could look like. And then just redesigning our ML model. In the way that it was originally designed, it was a pull-out model. It didn't really bring the most effective results that we were looking for. And then this year, it's kind of like a co-teaching station teaching model, but also that can put a strain on the ML teacher because she doesn't realistically have time to co-plan with 20 plus teachers. So we're just really trying to figure out what is the best suited model for the our L1 and L2 students, which is a lot more than we normally have in previous years. And then the next steps, kind of what I was talking about, the student government, and our leadership team is doing a really good job this year reviewing and analyzing the systems that we have to try to move it forward.
I think that's kind of the age-old thing for years. This is coaching versus intervention and what's the right balance between those two. So yeah, that's when you guys haven't figured out, let us know.
Yeah. And then some challenges that we're facing. It's not new to any of you. A lot of the rifts and, role changes the roles disappeared, but the work that needs to get done of that person in that role just got moved to another person. And it's really me playing the role of the principal, the vice principal, the SEL. And it's a heavy task. And it doesn't really allow for a lot of the instructional teaching and some of the other things I would love for it to have time for. And then we see the impact of it, and also our, intervention. We used to have a really robust intervention system in our school that was carried by 2 teachers. And then within the 2 teachers, we had the ESPs that were under them. This year, we kind of got a coach, which is awesome. She plays a really good role. She's actually vice principal and she's my SEL person. So she kind of shares a role with me, but it doesn't really replace the original system we had, which we really used to get those students that needed that second support. In recognition that, budgets and things happen. Tier 2 intervention though is where we're trying to put our heaviest emphasis on for next year. And then for next steps, I know it's, hopeful, but a thing that would really help is if we could get a second coach, I could almost take that coach and the coach I have and create an intervention/coaching model where that person, those two people take the same role as they had before, but also kind of flip it so that it's a hybrid model where they are working with students, but they're also supporting teachers and they can also support SEL within our building. I know it's helpful, but throwing it out there. And then just continuing to build our norms and expectations for our shared vision and culture and climate of our building. A lot of our new staff, we just want them to be on board with what we're trying to do at the school and then supporting the best way we can so that they don't get left behind because they think they're just going along with us, but being more intentional about connecting with them. And then what we are proud of as Temple Tigers. The biggest thing I'm proud of is our consistent PLC practice. It's not perfect or where it could possibly be, but it's beautiful right now. It's consistent, it's happening. The reduction and continued improvement in our discipline data is also another area of pride that we have. And that's a big part is due to our family engagement, student center. There's a lot of self-reflection from staff. We have conversations about, what part are we playing in the elevation of students and what part are students playing in accountability and what part are we playing in accountability. And then just really strengthening our tier 1 made a big difference in our data, but now kind of open up our eyes to tier 2 and tier 3 also need to be strengthened. Another thing we're really proud of is our whole school morning recess is in full swing. So every morning when kids get to school, they go straight outside unless it's raining. Then there's nowhere for them to put their backpacks, so they got to go to the gym. But it was a little rocky at the beginning figuring out what that looks like, but kids get at least 10 to 15, possibly 20 minutes every morning, right before they start their day, just playing, engaging with each other. And we thought it would be big and colossal and hard to handle, but kids love being outside and they're still responsible and respectful. And we have plenty of staff out there to make sure they are being safe. Operation Warm, really thankful and grateful that we had the opportunity to get jackets for every single kid in the school. And then we have a little bit extra just in case we have new kids that are coming in. We're moving towards intrinsic motivation. We started that last year. There's no rewards attached to the Tiger Paws that they earn. We do rewards class-wide. So for example, they did a really wonderful job in December showing up the right way at assembly. So they got an extra 10 minutes of recess. But it took from September to December to earn that 10-minute extra recess, and they were really excited. So we're trying to work on either you're getting rewarded for what you did, and that's what we should be getting rewarded for, or collectively you have to work together, and here are collective things that you can earn together, but it takes everybody to earn it together. And then we're really working on systematizing a lot of our stuff, like conferences, routines, and expectations, discipline. It's ideal. I don't need to be there, or nobody needs to be there for the system to continue to work. So a system shouldn't live with a person, but it should just live on its own, and everybody should have access to it so that it can move on its own. Our monthly family newsletter is in 6 languages, and we do it consistently every single month, updating parents on what we're doing and learning character traits, drills, all of those things and things that they can do at home with them. We use talking points more than we've ever done, so there's a lot of family communication and back and forth. And then last, we are out of school improvement. Folks.
I really like the one you mentioned about the collective working together. So that's really in line with some of this work that's going on, Portrait of a Graduate, and, it's, so you're going beyond just individual achievement, but working together, which hopefully can maybe get at some of those issues from the soccer as well. So that's a really nice addition.
Anything other students have comments, questions?
I don't know. The thing that I was just, I went to Temple Elementary. It's wonderful, and so did Arvin. We both went to Temple Elementary. It's wonderful to see, how things have changed and how things have grown and how things have also stayed the same in a lot of ways. I loved my time at Temple Elementary as much as I can remember it now, being 18. But it was
So old.
yeah, a whole 18 years old, so old now. But it's I'm, hearing about, I was a peer mediator in, Showalter. That restorative, justice training that those peer mediators get, it's very good, and it allows you to do restorative practices that, and a lot of those interpersonal skills I gained from being a peer mediator, they serve me very well in my day-to-day life, with actual conflicts amongst my peers that get more and more real as you get older. Not soccer fights, fights about a little more tangible things. But I think looking into those types of programs would be, I don't know how it would work in an elementary setting. I have no clue, but I know in middle school it was very beneficial. Yeah, I'm just proud that Temple Elementary is still doing amazing and their students are still the best and brightest.
I want to double back off of that because that's 10-year difference and I still feel the same way. It's great being able to come back and say, hey, this is an actual improvement. I get to see on what was going on when I was, just a knucklehead in class. But no, it sounds like the student government is coming together and that's where the peer mediation can start.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this was a great presentation. Appreciate you. Anyone else have any comments before we move on to the next agenda? All righty, if not, thank you so much for your presentation. We are moving on to budget and staffing presentation.
Speaking of folks or staff.
So unfortunately, our presentation is not quite as exciting. There's a lot to hear about students, but then we start talking about budgets. This is an annual presentation that we give to the board every single year. And I thought it would be really important for us to start with a little bit of a funding 101, especially with new board members. Because the system and how we're funded from the state is a little bit complicated. So when I present my financial statements to you each month, you will notice that I provide you an enrollment report. And that enrollment report is always based on an annual average FTE. And the reason why I do that is because that is how we are funded by the state. So what you can see is the annual average FTE, but the head count is often different, especially at the secondary level, because a number of our students attend Roman Start courses. They might have alternative learning. They might be homeschooled at the elementary level. And so they come in for specialist type classes. And so we can't count them for a full FTE. And so that's why we refer to this annual average FTE, okay? It's an important concept because that is the main driver of our funding model. So when I refer to state revenue, the OSPI, Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, calls that our apportionment. So it's the amount of money that we receive every single month based on our enrollment factors and then other factors that fall into that. So on the left side, our apportionment is defined as our basic education funding, and then our categorical funding, such as special education, highly capable learning assistance program, multilingual instruction, and our transportation, okay? And so what I'm focusing on today is mostly the basic education component, but I'll touch a little bit on some of those categorical programs as well. So go back one more slide, I'm not quite done, I'm sorry. So I talked about enrollment. So the state funds us on a prototypical, what they call a prototypical school model. And the funding factors embedded in that is student enrollment, average annual FTE, which drives the number of staffing units that we are funded on, which is then calculated into a formula to give us the total funding allocation that we receive. So again, quite easy, right?
Also, the one huge thing that's missing there, which I've been counting on for years, this is not based on what students need.
No.
This is just a flat, every student's the same,
Right, and I'm not going into the history of
Yeah.
the funding model, but this is an allocation model that was backed into.
Yeah,
To get us the money that the state could afford when this system came into play around 2019, no, 2017, I can't remember the dates. So again, it's not giving us what we need, it was just a mechanism to give us our money based on a formula that they could afford. So I'm just gonna say that, and then all of this came about because of a McCleary lawsuit that took place saying that we weren't fully funded. The state lost that case and they were required to then change the funding formula so that they could show that they were quote unquote fully funding us. And ever since the beginning of that latest funding model, we again are in a position where we're not fully funded. So that's just out there, everybody knows it. Okay, so now.
so the legislature has decided the definition of the word fully funding is whatever they fund.
Yes.
Helpful.
Well, that's, yeah. Has nothing to do with students.
So as a part of the prototypical school size, the legislature determined that we have a fixed theoretical school size based on the number of annual average FTE enrollment. And so we are funded for every elementary K6 now, mind you, we don't have sixth grade in the elementary school, they're in the middle school. And most districts in the state don't operate a K6 program. There's very few left that have a true K6 program. Most of them are K5. So we are funded at the prototypical school model of 400 annual average FTE at an elementary level. For middle school, it's defined as the 7th and 8th grade, that's 432, and then high school is 600, 9 through 12, okay? And so there's these really complicated formulas in the background and then that do its work. But in order, this is important because now we can go to the next slide to show that based on that enrollment, this is how we're funded in staffing units. So again, remember I talked about average annual FTE, the enrollment drives our staffing units, which then will turn into the amount of money that we get. So based on this, the school level staff positions, and I'm gonna be really frank this, a couple of these rows here, the data is a little bit old. I didn't update it. I pulled it from a previous year work that I was doing with our budget advisory committee. And so I didn't update this, but the numbers have not changed significantly. So that's why I just kept it as it is.
I was gonna ask, but.
So as you're rolling through this, for every 400 elementary K6 students that we receive 1.253 principals. Again, an allocation model that was backed into, because how do you have 1.253 FTE? It doesn't happen. You're either at a 1.0, a 1.5, 1.2, or 2.0. I mean, it's just not possible to have 1.253 principal. At the middle school, 432 students, you get 1.353, and at the high school, you get 1.880. If you go down that list, it gets worse because for every 400 students for elementary school, you get a 0.017 psychologist. A 0.002 and a 0.007 at the high school. Okay, so these are the allocation staffing based on the number of students that you have in your building.
And going into 9 to 12, we're getting higher in terms of a base enrollment. We're going down in terms of funding for psychologists.
Yeah.
And the need's there because we use psychologists to evaluate our students for special education services, which is mandated by federal law.
The other thing I have on this one is, so social workers, a school that gets has 5% poverty gets the same allocation for social workers as a school that's 90% poverty.
Yeah, yes.
That's nuts.
That is
Right.
nuts.
Yeah, it doesn't, poverty does not come into play in this, funding formula.
Yeah, so just for reference, we're the same size district, we get funded the same as Mercer Island,
I heard about that.
or we get funded the same as a Shelton. And, you know, with the rural, urban, high poverty, it doesn't matter.
Right. So any questions on these slides? Again, it gets very complicated very quickly.
It does. Do we have any information that I can look into this further for, is it an RCW? Is it a specific tax code? Is this the formula itself?
The formula itself is embedded within the legislative budget
Okay,
that is presented, approved, and passed every single year.
okay.
Okay,
Actually, if you want, the other explanation, so talking with the Senate produces a K-12
mhm.
funding, funding something, I forget, but anyway, I can send it to you.
That'd be great.
Yeah, so the legislative budget that is proposed, so each, the House, the Senate, the governor, when they come out with their budget proposals, they will put in here whether there's any changes to these staffing units, or whether they would change the enrollment, prototypical models. That's where it's embedded in the budget document, every single year, yeah. So if we roll to the next slide. So this just gives you an example of how many students it would take to generate a 1.0 FTE for each staff position. And so that's where it gets really daunting, because if you look at, especially in the area of school nurse, social worker, psychologists, you'd need 23,529 kids for a psychologist to achieve a 1.0 FTE as a psychologist, based on the money model. Okay, so I throw that out there because all of this information is, like I said, embedded into these formulas that are created to give us the total dollar amount that we're allocated in our basic education apportionment. Okay, so annual average FTE is super important as we're trying to develop our budget. If we're off, we get less. If, let's say we, an example that we're in right now is I had budgeted 2,588 annual average FTE. And we're right now sitting as of today, 2,533. So we are less than what we had budgeted, which means that we will receive less apportionment for the remainder of the school year because we didn't hit our enrollment target. That's not as bad for us, but if that continues in the future, that's super problematic, because if we don't make adjustments to our spending levels and that continues to happen, that's how we ended up in budget conditions in the first place. So we really have to watch that and monitor that very, very closely. We're fortunate, there's a couple of districts, when they did their budget last year, they were off. There was one district I saw that was off by 1,500 kids. And when you're adding up your allocation that you receive, which is about 12,000 per kid that we get based on the formula and how it all ends up working out, you know, that's a lot of money. And especially if you're staffed at that higher enrollment level, you're in trouble really quickly. Okay, so that's why it's super important when I show this information, you know, just to show you how our allocations work and how we're funded.
And the other thing that's kind of that is you can't de-staff in the middle of the year.
No. To the bargaining agreements.
So this is not a private company where you can just lay off
Yeah.
people at any time.
Right. Yeah, we have to follow the rules of the bargaining agreement. So once the school year starts, we're within that. Now, you can reduce your costs. So if somebody leaves the district, you know, they resign from their position, we could be intentional in not filling that position. And we did that actually in the 23-24 school year. You know, so as people left, we pretty much did a hiring freeze and didn't refill positions to help mitigate some of the issues that we were facing when we came by conditions.
And I'm not too familiar with funding, so just to ask this question, so
Sure.
currently being at 2533 and you were budgeted for 2588, correct? So between those, are we going to have to return funding or are we
No.
gonna have to? Okay.
No. So what happens is the way the state funds us is that the first 4 months of the year, it's based on our budget, your FTE, budgeted enrollment. And then in January is when they start making those adjustments.
Okay.
And so in January, we saw our first adjustment and it was based on the average annual FTE. And do not ask me why they wait until December. I don't know why. It's always been December when those unfortunate adjustments start coming through. So if you're above your enrollment projection, again, you're waiting until January to see the benefit of that.
Okay.
So it works both ways.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. On top of that, so if there's no questions on the lovely, complicated, prototypical skill model. And again, it is complicated. It's not fun. I mean, it's kind of crazy. The report that we receive every month, you can go out to OSPI's webpage and pull, go to apportionment and pull that report. It's like a 57-page report that shows you all of the calculations that are embedded. It's, if you want to go to sleep really quickly, that's a good report to look at. So, the other thing that we're doing, and when I presented this slide, OSPI had informed us to expect at least 20% cuts in our funding in all of our title programs from the federal level. However, just recently here in the last week, I think it was after my slide deck was presented and complete, the federal government came out and has actually increased Title I funding and then kept everything else flat. So it looks like we will not experience the 20% cut from the federal government. However, because enrollment is decreasing, we will see reductions in this area because our funding is based on the enrollment from the previous school year. Okay, so last year, our enrollment was about 2769. And like I said, this year, the enrollment is less. And so next year, we'll see some reductions in our federal funding just because the enrollment has gone down from the previous school year. Questions in that area? So this is just all of our federal title funding and special education federal funding that we receive at this time and the dollar amounts that we currently have.
That was really pretty good news that we're not gonna get this 20% back, because that would have hurt a lot.
Oh, well, yes. And there was also continued talk about the Title II, 3, and 4 being completely eliminated.
Right.
And so it's really good news that funding is continuing into next year. So.
Which is not what a lot of people were expecting.
Right, I wasn't expecting it. As a matter of fact, I was gonna start my budget and do the same that I did last year and be real conservative. So this is good news for us. So if there's no questions on that, I'll move to the next slide.
I should just add one. So the federal government funding is much more needs-based. So
Yes.
Title I is based on your poverty numbers. And so, it's only about, I don't know, 10, 15, maybe 20% of our budget, something like that. It's not a huge number, but it is actually the one that's needs-based. It'd be nice if the states was needs-based. But anyway, the federal government is needs-based, particularly Title I.
So speaking of needs-based, on the state side, we do get some additional state funding that is needs-based. And so our biggest funding source in that area is our Learning Assistance Program. This is funding to support students in math, reading, social and emotional support. And it is also based on our percent of free and reduced lunch percentage, and then our high, if we're considered high poverty. So we do get quite a bit of funding. Again, this is a grant, so there's strings attached. There's specific ways that we can use that funding. So we cannot just charge a regular basic education teacher that's teaching the kindergarten class. It has to be tied to the requirements of this grant. And so, there's a few more strings attached to that. Again, funding in this area will go down because it looks at your previous year enrollment for LAP and LAP high poverty. Special education is based on the current year funding sources and student enrollment data that we receive.
All the fun formulas.
Mhm.
And the problem, the big problem with the LAP program, LAP and LAP priority is it's only about, it's way underfunded, it's about 3% of the total, education budget. So those charts from before for all the prototypical school model, that's the mass of the funding. And so LAP funding is actually a pretty small, it's way too small percentage.
Correct.
So it's there, and they claim, oh, well, we're funding well, you're not funding anywhere near close to what it should be.
And then on the state, as I refer to the apportionment, right now, this is a short session. And so the state's also grappling with budget shortfall. You know, I mean, we're hearing it all over the news, and so I'm not anticipating any true increases in K-12 funding, for this next school year.
To some degree, the good news about this LAP and the LAP high poverty is part of what the state calls basic education. And the Supreme Court has ruled that you can't cut basic education just because you have a budget problem. You have to give a valid educational reason to do it, which is why the state legislature tends to not like to increase LAP funding, because if they do it, then they're on the hook for it. Going forward, they can't just rip it out if they have anyway, that's one of the battles I fight with them about getting more LAP funding, but that's where the funding, we have the bills in there for that, to increase that, and it's just stalling, so.
Yeah.
One quick question here. I'm sorry. Funding based on the percentage of free and reduced percent by school. Can you say that?
Yes, so the funding that we receive for both learning assistance program and then the learning assistance program high poverty is based on the number of students that qualify for free and reduced lunch.
Oh, okay.
So measured.
And so measured income, and percentage of students that qualify drives our funding for those purposes. So this spreadsheet's probably a little bit hard to read. I know that I did present a whole levy funding kind of overview a few months ago to the board. And so I want to point out that this spreadsheet is provided by OSPI as we're doing our budget planning, and it helps determine how much we will receive or what we think we will receive from the state for the approved levy by the voters. And so again, this is another one of those complications that come through because there's parameters set within the levy authority. And thankfully, this is one of the things that was changed in the legislative budget last year. It actually gave us opportunity to collect more levy. And so we're actually able to collect the full amount that was approved by the voters as a result of those legislative changes.
So just to let you know, the EPNO, there's three things that if you look at your property taxes, you'll see this under as school local is one, and then we also have our what we call our capital projects, which is our technology and building. That's another one that you'll see and then the third one is paying off the bonds. But so this is one of the three local tax components that go to schools.
Yes, and this makes about 13 to 14% of our general fund budget is the levy. So we do rely on this pretty heavily. So I know the question came up when we were reviewing the board docs for me to include this slide. So I've done so because the question was, what is the impact for budget planning for next year? So I ran this report and put in the assumptions. So the state pulls this information from the Department of Revenue, and Department of Revenue's assumptions are always like way too generous. And so we really have to pull back those assumptions. And so it gives us opportunity to put in alternate assumptions in the data. So I did that, and then I also looked at the reductions of what we think enrollment will look like so it'll pull current year enrollment for calendar year 2027, because it's also a look back of 1 year. And then I'm using my budget that I'm planning for this year to do the 2028 calendar year. And so if you look at the two highlighted areas, based on the calculations and formulas, our voter approved levy for calendar year 2026, and the reason why I say calendar year is because the state King County runs from January 1st through January 1st through December 31st, but we run on a fiscal year. So we're a 9/1 through 8/31. And so we get some of the proceeds kind of crossing our fiscal year and everything. So for calendar year 2026, our voter approved levy is 9,722,756. And based on the calculations, we will receive that full amount for calendar year 2026. Based on, if you look at the estimated payable revenue calendar year at the bottom, those two match. And you see the same thing in 2027.
But not 2020.
But not 2028. That's when we're going to start seeing some issues because our enrollment is declining. And so based on the calculations. Now, I want to point out, this is a very rough estimate. OSPI always updates the spreadsheet later in the spring. Once, especially when the legislative session ends, so that if there's any changes to this, they make those updates and then they'll repost this so that we can run our numbers in it. So this is based on information from last year's spreadsheet. So this is very preliminary and could change. So I just want to point that out as well.
So this is another one that's capped based on our enrollment.
Yep.
So that's why this is another area where enrollment matters.
And it also plays into our assessed valuation as well. And I know that our assessed valuation is actually in a decrease, it's a percentage decrease. Our assessed valuation has been going up at about 2 to 3% every year. And this year it's actually at a negative 2.1. So assessed valuation of all the properties in our area is actually been down. So that also plays into it. So as I've given you all of that information, we have to look at our enrollment projections. And so we have to look at historical, what's happening currently, keeping in mind what's happening with our federal administration and that's doing to the families. And then looking at statewide, what's happening statewide and what are the predictions moving forward. Okay, so Tukwila, it's always been a little bit of a challenge. We have a lot of fluidity in our McKinney-Vento population. So we have unpredictable inflow and outflow of families in and out of the district. Housing support availability, this is a huge issue in the entire Puget Sound corridor. Housing and inflation and costs keep increasing. Affordability is becoming more and more difficult. And then overall birth rates are declining, actually, not only in the state, but nationwide. There was a huge report that just came out, talks about enrollment declines, and that nationwide we are in a decline for birth rates.
The other big part for us, which you can see when you start looking at students over the years, is what's going on in the border So when the borders are kind of open, that's when we'll see, increase in student enrollment, because we've been in an area where there's been focus on settling new refugees and new immigrants. And when the border shuts down, then our enrollment goes down. So it's, you talk about predicting, it's pretty predictable, given that Trump's gonna be in here for another bit. The
Right.
border is shut down, and so our enrollment is gonna be down because of that.
Right.
I had a question on that in regards to students that are now going to private school, homeschool, or something like that. How do we see those numbers in here?
It's a lot harder to predict because we can't get that information. We don't have access to that information. The state doesn't really have access to that information, so, we get the homeschool numbers because they're required to, pretty much ask permission to be homeschooled, so we receive that, but we don't get the data on, private school participation.
I saw on your projections later, and we'll get to that when we get to it, but there's about a 10,000 difference between the birth rate versus our enrollment rates. That's, I'm assuming, where we get some of the homeschool numbers.
Yeah, homeschool, private school.
And we have had housing, and so I'll just use Tuttle Elementary as an example, if that's okay, honey, there. But when they had a lower enrollment predicted from last year, her office staff and her did some research and found out that there was an apartment that is shutting down, moved out the families, refurbishing or remodeling, or whatever they're doing. But I think in the hopes of raising rent, so those families were displaced and they've left. So that was a huge impact. That was around, I guess it was around 60 kids, correct? 50 to 60 kids. It was pretty impactful to their community. So those are other examples, just localized right here.
So as we are projecting our enrollment for next year and that we're starting our budget development process, we have to be, like I said before, we have to be conservative. We're a small district. If we're off by too much, that really bites into our fund balance that we just restored. We have the inability to lay off staffing once the school year starts. We have timelines we have to meet that Erin's going to refer to here soon. And so we just have to be, I think, a little bit more conservative than usual to make sure that we're not putting ourselves back at risk of having a fund balance that gets depleted very, very quickly. So what we'll do is one of the things that we'll do is we'll start advertising for open enrollments for kindergartners, newcomer kindergartners, so that we can start monitoring that, see what that looks like. And then we're starting to monitor kind of an inflow and outflow of students, even now as we speak, but we continue that process even through the summer, so we can kind of get an idea and gauge of what's happening. But this ongoing monitoring really starts in September and carries through all the way until the end of the school year. So this slide I get 0 credit for. I pulled this slide from a presentation that OSPI did at the annual WASDA conference. So this was one of the, professional development presentations that they provided to anyone who attended this particular situation. So this slide is really telling. This talks about the enrollment projections statewide, and it's looking specifically at kindergarten and 12th grade. So our newcomers into the system, and then our 12th grade cohort that's exiting the system. And so as you can see, the 12th grade head count over time had increased. And it's just based because it's catching up based on enrollment. We had a little bit of growth, but you're seeing that kindergarten really get impacted. Obviously, we saw it in during COVID, so 2020, 2021. We had a lot of families, I think, that chose to delay start of their students in kindergarten. So you saw that, but you also see that overall the birth rates are declining. So it's just, and it's not predicted to catch up anytime soon. That decline is expected to continue. So as you look again at the next slide that was presented by OSPI, the enrollment projections and birth rates that they hold in the Department of Health shows that continual decline over time. And if you look at some of the projections for the next 10 years, this number is going to continue to go down. So this next slide is probably a little bit harder to see, and I know that we've got, so we'll probably come to this slide and then have to come back to it because it has some of the staffing information in here. But this is our student enrollment over time. And again, this is average annual FTE. So the left box shows you that in 16-17, we were actually at 2,861 students. I can't even read that, I'm sorry. That's my eyesight to that.
Yeah, 61.
Yeah. And then you saw like the very sharp, you started to see the decline, and then COVID hit in 2021. So you see this huge dip. In 23-24, we saw a number of asylum seeking students coming into the district. So we saw this huge increase, and now it's starting to decline again. And again, this is, I think a lot of it is a result of the current administration. We're seeing those declines. And so we're projecting right now, this number is rough. So again, I don't want anybody to hold me to it, but right now we're looking at 2,459 as our projected enrollment for the next fiscal year. Again, I'm watching this, it could change a little bit, but I don't expect it to go up. If anything, it might go down a little bit more as I'm looking at doing my work and my projections and being conservative. And so as you can see, between last year and this current year, we've already seen a decline of students, exiting our system. And so that decline is going to continue, especially with our current administration.
So what I was asking, actually, what I was asked, so I don't know if you're gonna talk about the staffing, so.
He will.
Okay. Because what I was really looking for was the one on top of the other, because that gets really telling. I mean, I got this from Jolynn Berge at North Shore, and that's what we really need to watch is how the staffing correlates to the student numbers, because that's what gets you in trouble and that's kind of how we got in trouble, and North Shore is finding out they got it added a little earlier. But when your students are going down and your staff is not going down, that's a recipe for going into fighting conditions. And so it's interesting to watch ours. It looks, yeah. So anyway, this is actually the chart I was looking for.
Okay.
You have to kind of on the same chart with the same scale when you go and you them. So at this point, we're kind of probably from an accounting perspective at about the right staffing level. But like you say, if enrollment keeps going down, then staffing level is going to have to keep going in.
Right. That is good.
All right, good evening, everyone. Aaron Durant here, HR, Labor Relations, and Technology Services. The entry point for this part of the presentation is really to discuss the roles that labor plays in the district's financial health. And we have this broken up into, we'll have conversation about the timelines that we have that are set forth by our contracts with our labor partners, our union partners, and association partners. And then we'll talk about some of the phases that we've broken up those contracts so that they are comprehensible to people. And we've done that through a timeline process. And then we'll go into some responsive steps that the district takes throughout the spring and into the summer and possibly the fall. And we'll get into the detail there. And we have a problem of practice that as a system, we are grappling with and having conversations with our labor partners about and continuing to have those conversations that we'll dive into as well. So we'll start with a quick overview of the reductions timeline. And so what we have with the timeline is we start with the understanding that one strategy for labor reductions or staffing reductions is actually attrition. So that's staff that are resigning or staff that are retiring. And so we actually, HR sends a communication out to all of our staff members saying, hey, who's interested in giving us early notice of resignation or retirement? And we sent that out. Our goal was to send that out by January 31st, and we did that this year. And we're asking for that information back by March 1st. And we're starting to collect that. Today, we're sitting at 2. We received our second notice today. We have fielded some questions from staff members about retirement and the process. And so we have those conversations. What that actually fits our pattern because we've seen that most of the requests actually come in closer to the due date. So we're, again, March 1st is our due date for those, but of course we'll accept them after March 1st. And then HR is presently working on seniority reports. And those reports are a list of our staff members in their collective bargaining units in order of years of experience. And years of experience in the industry. And we have seniority in our services units, we have it in our teaching unit, in our classified unit, and in our principal unit. And so we have a deadline of February 15th to issue those seniority reports because those are used as a tool when we are pursuing reductions, which we'll get to in a minute. And then by March 6th, Human Resources will have those conversations with union leaders about its intent to reduce in the different bargaining groups. One of the things that is a fact is that approximately 85% of the district's expenses is on labor. And so it makes sense that if we are going to make reductions to our expenses, that it will be labor on some level. And so it's likely the case this year that we will, by March 6th, be notifying our labor leads that there is an intent to reduce staff in each of the groups. By April 14th, the board will review what are called resolutions, and you'll be authorizing through these resolutions authorizing the superintendent to pursue those reductions within the different groups. And so more information will be coming about that, but we just wanted you to see that at this point now. By May 13th, the Human Resources Department will work with supervisors in all of the bargaining groups to deliver the notices. And each of our contracts has a unique process for how those are delivered. We also connect that to the state timeline and to provide you with an example, the certificated teachers who are on a provisional 1, 2, or 3 contract have to be notified by May 15th, according to the state, whether or not they have a contract for the following year. And at this time, we have 64 staff members that are either provisional 1, 2, or 3 in our system.
Can you define provisional 1, 2, or 3? What does that mean?
Yeah, so early career teachers are hired on a contract that is, provisional contract is they have a year, each step when you're on a provisional contract is a year of guaranteed service or guaranteed working opportunity. So you are provisional, which means it's a synonym for temporary. However, because you're not continuing, so you're guaranteed as a provisional 1, you're guaranteed that first year, but you can be non-renewed, which means that the district, if they take action by May 15th, could say, we don't have a spot for you for financial reasons, because we need to adjust. We aren't certain about our financial outlook. Okay? The same thing can happen to you on your second year when you're provisional 2. The same thing can happen to you during your third year when you're provisional 3. If you make it past provisional 3, then you enter continuing contract status. And so in order to experience a reduction as a staff member on a continuing contract, there's another process that the district would have to exercise. And that's called a RIF, or reduction in force. So the state has provided districts with the opportunity to make adjustments to their staffing. We have 64 people out of a system of approximately 174 teachers who are on provisional 1, 2, or 3. So that's a lot of room to make some staffing adjustments without having to go through a RIF, reduction in force, which is a pretty involved process. That was a lot of information, but there's a difference between provisional 1, 2, and 3 and continuing contract. Okay?
To some degree, so this has come up with one of our students. One of the implications of this is that, the younger teachers are going to get laid off first, but that's, as in most unions.
And that's part of our problem with practice that we'll get to here. Yes. Okay, and then by May 21st, so conceivably because we know that one of our strategies is attrition, a second strategy is non-renewals of provisional 1, 2, or 3, then written into the law is an opportunity for anyone that's experienced a non-renewal for provisional 1, 2, or 3 is to appeal to the superintendent. And so we've scheduled this into our timeline that we would like those appeal meetings to happen by May 21st. And then the superintendent will then respond to the appeal, each individual appeal after those meetings take place. And those notices would be delivered by May 21st.
I have a question.
Yes.
How often do reductions in force take place, and is there severance tied to that as well?
Great question. So I'll start with the non-renewal. It's very common for non-renewals of provisional 1, 2, or 3 to take place every year. And they range from 1 to 17 1 year. And there is not a severance associated with non-renewals. Reductions in force are more common in the classified group than they are in the certificated teacher group. And again, there is no severance associated with reductions in force for classified or for certificated.
Thank
The
you.
other part of this process that's interesting to understand is that you talk about attrition. Usually people don't put in their retirement until towards the end, even after this May deadline. And so sometimes, frequently, or I don't know, you can tell me whether it's frequently or not, but teachers that have been, let go can come back because there's been new positions that have opened up because of late attrition, essentially.
Yeah, that's right. And so we have, and we'll get into this when we get into the phases, but we do have recall processes that are built into our labor contracts, and we have steps that we take. If we could go, onto the phases. So we broke out phase 1 to go to explore what happens with the non-renewals of certificated staff on provisional 1, 2, or 3 contracts. And again, this is just a more detail of our timeline. So by May 13th, those individuals will receive notice. And the HR team walks alongside, along with the supervisor support, walks alongside each of those staff members. We have some pretty clear guidance with lots of detail about what's going to happen with your annualized compensation, with your benefits, opportunities for reference letters, unemployment, because people would, we can't tell people if they're qualified, but we can certainly give people guidance for unemployment opportunity, and then other next steps. So we do that again by May 13th. Next up is reduction in force. Again, this is more unique rare within the certificated teacher group, but more common in the classified group. Again, we're aiming for May 13th, receiving those or sending out those notices. And we would then, again, just like with the teacher group, with the non-renewals, we walk alongside each of those staff members that are impacted. And then we don't have a non-renewal process for administrative staff, but we do have a reduction in force process if any administrative staff positions are being reduced. And so again, we're targeting May 13th for those notices. And again, supporting staff through that process. That all happens in phase 1. Then phase 2 is the notices to the classified group. And this would be we would bring in our timelines within the classified SEIU contract and the TEA ESP contract. We also have seniority reports that were issued by February 15th that we bring those in, and then we go through the seniority report, or excuse me, the reduction in force process following seniority.
And every school district has the same May 13th deadline, so you can imagine, if enrollment is going down, is probably for most of the districts around us, there's going to be this kind of flood in there at that time, people looking for jobs at other places.
Yeah, and the state deadline is May 15th. We set it earlier just because we do want to provide as early notice as possible. And again, ours is by May 13th. Because we want to make sure that people have opportunities, that they're not missing out on opportunities if we know the information early. We're balancing what we know with their need to have future opportunity. And then we do have a phase 3. And so phase 3 is for staff members that are in categorical positions. And so this has impacted staff in the past. And to provide you with an example, in each of our elementary schools, we have in the past have had at least 2 instructional interventionists. And during phase 3 one year, where we had a similar setup, one of those positions was eliminated. And but the district didn't take a reduction in force step. We reduced the position here, and then we reduced one of those interventionist positions at each building, and then we moved those staff members to vacant positions. Those vacant positions may have come about because of a non-renewal. It may have come about because of a resignation or retirement, but it became available to them that way. And so we are keeping that as an option for this year as well. Then we move into some of our key considerations. Amy Fleming had talked about this earlier, where we know that the student enrollment is fluctuating this year. I think it's fluctuating more this year than it has in the past. And so we're keeping a very close watch on it and looking at what our plans are then for reductions this spring and summer and into the fall. One of our strategies is to meet with all of the building leaders. So we meet with the building leaders and we bring in special student services, we bring in teaching and learning, and we have collaborative conversations. We look at what the projections are, we look at where their staffing is. We also bring in the information that we have so far about attrition and have planning conversations. So we aren't making them in a silo, we're bringing in school leaders. And they are a big part of that. Then we'll just continue to monitor that. The third bullet talks about some of the vacant positions, and we call those, that can either be a hiring freeze or it could be what we call a lag hire, like a delayed hire, like we're gonna pause on that because we're not sure about it. But some of the vacancies are for positions that we know we need to backfill because we have students that need that service or that need that support. And so we know that we're going to have to hire. So that isn't the case for all positions. I don't think it's reasonable to say that we could just do a blanket hiring freeze. It's just not realistic based on what we need, on how we need to support our scholars.
19.
Yeah. Next up is just being responsive. And one of the things that I think this is a continuation of what we've just covered, but we do have a process for reductions in force. We know that this is a very impactful time for our scholars, for our staff members that are affected by it. We've heard testimony from scholars about how this impacts them in the classroom. It was mentioned that sometimes the early career teachers, because we have 64 early career teachers in year 1, 2, or 3, and so sometimes that can be a challenge for people to hear. And so we want to be responsive there and not make any hasty decisions. We do have a recall process for staff that have been non-renewed on provisional contracts. And so if by May 13th, because we have that May 15th deadline, the situation is looking one way, but by June 3rd, we notice that enrollment is increasing, we can recall. We have recalled staff members at each of our buildings over the years. We've done it in August. We've done it right before school started in early September. So that always remains an option for us. Timelines in consideration. Next slide. So we've got I think, again, this is just a continuation of what we talked about earlier. We've got, I think the highlight here is just staying in touch with our staff members that are impacted, staying in touch with our union leaders, and making sure that we are honoring our part of the agreement, which is meeting those timelines, communicating with staff and the union leadership, being responsive if we have data that shows that we can bring back staff members, that we take action. And we're committed to doing that. And next slide, please. So one of the challenges that we've had is that every year we go to the Tacoma Convention Center and they host a regional hiring fair. And it's a great way for our principals, our support staff to meet aspiring educators face to face. And we have hiring goals as well of hiring a workforce that reflects our student demographics, that speaks the languages that our students speak. And we've actively diversified our staff because of those steps that we were taking to go to the hiring fair. And one of the problems of practice is that our early career teachers tend to be staff who reflect our student demographics and speak the languages that our students speak. And so we're trying to balance that with having to make these, having to make these reductions. And so if we can, push for, people to retire, or people that are choosing to leave the system for resignation or retirement, then, that's what we want to focus on, so that we don't have to reduce staffing for our early career teachers. Another layer here is that more than 50% of our 64 staff that are early career are multilingual, teach in the dual language program strand, or are a special education educator. And we need those staff, to support our scholars and to support our student needs. So it's a conversation that we're having, as a team. It's a conversation that we have, when the hiring teams meet. I just wanted to make this visible, that this is something that we struggle with as a system.
So what I want to do next, so I guess I should stop, make sure there's no questions in any of the information that Aaron just presented to you all before I just automatically jump into this next slide and assume. Okay, hearing none. So much like Aaron has dates that he has to adhere to, I also have dates I have to adhere to. So in accordance with state law, I'm required to present a budget to the school board and have the board approve said budget no later than August 31st. That's the technical timeline. We would really need to have backed that up in order for me to submit a final budget and have it reviewed, because it's required to be reviewed by our Educational Service District, Puget Sound ESD, as well as the OSPI. So in reality, if we back that up, we really would be presenting a final budget preparation resolution for your approval at the August 11th board meeting. So as we back up that timeline, then what will happen is I will present the initial budget to you at the July 28th board meeting, and we would have a public hearing so that community can provide input to the budget. And so those are the real critical dates that we have to really follow as we're trying to develop the budget for next year. So then I'll start at the top. So as you're all aware, the legislative session began on January 12th. It's a short session, so they're scheduled to end on March 12th. With everything that's going on right now, I don't anticipate a lot of changes, so I believe that they'll end on time. We have had years in the past where they can't come to an agreement on anything, and so they've had to do supplemental sessions in order to pass a budget. I'm not seeing or hearing any indications or ruffles that might take place this year. And I think it's just because of the state of the economy and where we are. So there's not a lot of fighting for things just because there's just no money. So we're in today at the board work session. One of my slides I'm presenting, it says on budget priorities. One of the things that I'm going to show you is last year's budget priorities, because that plays a factor into what I should be thinking about for the next year.
So the only fighting that's going on in the legislature since we went down is to prevent what we call unfunded mandates. They, as usual, are they're not going to give us any new money, but they're going to tell us how to spend some money that they want that they don't have. And so that's the big fight that's going on right now. So we're actually fairly optimistic. They're reducing. Some of the legislators, when we were down there, got the message that they need to kind of reduce that. So we'll see what happens, but that's the fight. That's the only fight education wise.
Right.
Yeah, they're not going to new money.
No. I'm scheduled to provide a budget update on March 10th, which will be really close to the end of the session. And so I'll have a really clear picture at that point on what the legislators, both House and Senate, are proposing. In some cases, they may already have a compromised budget at that point. And so it may be said and done by that March 10th date. But at least I'll have an idea of what it's looking like, the picture for K-12 education, what that might mean for us. So then, there's also a presentation, at the March 24th. I'll give you, an idea of where we are, what it's looking like. I'll give you an update on the enrollment numbers, what we're using for our projections, what I think revenue is going to look like, things of that nature. And then again, I'll present, some information at the May 26th board meeting. So all of this is to say that there will be updates that are coming to you so that there's no surprises by the time we get to July, as far as what the budget, we think the budget will look like, for the next fiscal year. This next slide is just a little bit of the full budget timeline that we lay out. So it incorporates both, the information that I'm tracking, and it also includes all of the, human resources timelines as well, so that you can see it on one page. A little bit of a change from last year. I spent a considerable amount of time last year with a budget, advisory committee, which was community, engagement. We spent a lot of time, developed, some priorities. Unfortunately, with what's happening this year with this cumulative upgrade that we're working on, my capacity is just, it's already like full and brimming. And so I am going to use the work that we did from the budget advisory committee group, and then utilize a survey this year, to save myself a little bit of time, because I just don't have capacity to run both, processes. And so we'll utilize that, and then I'll seek some additional input from some of the committee members, that were part of that process last year. Just to, to make sure that I'm on track as far as, what they're thinking for their priorities as we're looking, to develop the budget for next year.
Ms. Fleming, who are these community members that are on this advisory committee?
So we had student representation, we had parent representation, we had teacher representation, and we had principal administrator representation. It was a committee of about, if everybody was there, it was about 15 people that were a part of the committee. So we had a couple meetings where people couldn't attend, but overall it was about 15 people.
And how are they selected?
It was an invite that was sent out, and so if they indicated they wanted to attend, they attended. So we also did a push to our teachers and really, hey, we really want you a part of this committee and everything. So.
Thank you.
So I wanted to present to you today the board priorities that were utilized when we were developing the 25-26 budget. And so there was a sentence that I pulled out of there, and it was because we were inviting positions with the state. And so it was kind of that overarching statement of, reaching financial stability. And then keeping that in mind, these were the priorities. And so my question to you today, and you don't necessarily have to answer these today, but it's a conversation that you all should have as far as what should we as the district do to make sure that we're using what you are considering the priorities of the district as we're developing the 26-27 budget. And this was the listing that was used and agreed upon with the school board last year. Excuse me. As a little background, as a part of binding conditions, we were required to report this back to the state. We're not in binding conditions anymore, so there's no requirement to report this. But this is something that I also included in my budget book and documents. So it is something that you should all consider to let me know what we need to do and what our focus should be.
So we actually used to call this board budget priorities. I think that word budget should be in there just because we also have another thing called priorities that the board should do for ourselves. So And a couple of points on this. One is, this is kind of guides not only, potentially guides not only, you know, how we want to spend the money that we're going to get, but also grants that we can look for. We've been pretty successful, I think, this last year in getting a lot of grant money. And so some of the priorities that we may want to do may not be possible through the money we get through the state and federal, you know, local, but you know, if we were smart about looking out for grant money, you know, that's because one of the problems always with grants frequently is, you know, they dangle this money in front of you and, you know, it comes with strings, of course, and do those strings fit, you know, our values and what we need to do in our district, as opposed to, you know, understand what we want to do and then go find the grants that fit, you know, which I think we've been doing a pretty good job recently of finding those grant dollars. And so, you know, this list, I think, includes, in my mind, includes not only the priorities for spending the money that we get from the, you know, state and federal, local, but also guides where we should probably go looking for grant money as well. And so with that in mind, to me, I like this, I like the list. I would just, there's a few things I would kind of bullet some more specifics under some of these items. And so I'll just run through those quickly. So the first one relates to all of our scholars to see the highest quality expression succeed well in our school community and beyond. So to me, there's a couple of bullets under that one. There, the whole area of STEAM and CTE, you know, so I'm a little worried that we're, because of all the various budget cuts, we're kind of, you know, maybe forgetting some of the work that we've been working on STEAM and CTE, you know, particularly since like CTE, we did a whole remodel of Foster High School to include more CTE programs up there. So I just want to make sure, we talked about it a little bit at the last meeting, and, you know, we understand we're, you know, it's tight because we don't have enough people to do all the things we need. I just want to make sure that one's kind of gets out there. So again, potentially if there's grant money or different things or creative thing, and then the whole STEAM area, a number of years ago, we invested in our creative learning labs, which are at all the elementary schools and Showalter. And I just want to make sure that's another area that's, you know, so STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. I want to make sure those, you know, don't kind of get lost in the shuffle, because in those two areas in particular, there's a lot of job opportunities in those areas. So I want to make sure we're not just kind of losing those. And then the other one I would put under this, all scholars, number one is the portrait of graduate work. I think that's really important because it can help guide some of the, you know, the whole work about that is going beyond just the test scores and the basics. You know, we need all the basics for sure, that, you know, reading and math, but there's so much more that we want for our students in terms of the collaboration and all the things that we talk about in the portrait of the graduate. So just kind of keeping those kind of out there as things that we just don't want to forget. And then under number two, ensure staff are equipped with tools and resources they need. The one I put under there is curriculum, and we're doing that. I think particularly there's a lot of focus on the reading curriculum. That's really basic. So I want to just kind of call that one out and reinforce that that's a important one under there. And then the last one I think I had here was under number three, physical, emotional, mental well-being of our student population out of the classroom. We've been doing some work on indoor air quality, and I know we got some grants. It's another area where there's grants to be had. So that's one where I think I'd like to just kind of under that one put an example. Here's something to kind of focus on. So I think those were, So I like the 6, and just with those kind of little focus areas underneath to make sure that we're just forgetting is what I would like to see on these.
Director Sherlock,
Not at the moment. Thank you.
I thought that this was good from where it was at, and with Director Larson's additions, I think that's a good direction. Again, since we have majority of the board that is brand new, I think it's good that we focus and kind of add the priority of recovery. Because from what I'm hearing is we are still within that area of finding conditions. So if we are getting that reduction in students, if we are getting the reductions in staff, if we are projected to continue on that trend, having that fund money and prioritizing not only the highest quality of instruction, but also what brings that school community together. So yes, absolutely CTE, absolutely anything that can expand what we're learning. But this is a good outline. Director Papillon, do you have anything?
Nothing for me. Thank you.
I think that concludes this report, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
so at the March, what did I say, 10th, 12th? I'll bring this back, with these additions, just so you all can see it, to make sure that I've captured everything, that I've written down, make sure I didn't mishear anything. Just so that you can see it again, and if there's any additional tweaks or additions that we need to make at that time, we can also do that. Because it can be fluid up until, we're getting closer to our timelines, so.
And I'm sure we'll change our minds as we grow in our roles, so.
Yes.
So I would like to just, the chart that, we had as one of in our board handbook and kind of look forwards for the future, this idea of watching this graph of staff versus students. I think this is an important one that we should start including in our, we talk about an annual review of this to make sure that, because this is lacking this as one of the reasons that we fell into, and it seems to be now become kind of best practice. I mean, Joe Edberg, who's one of the, best CFOs in the state, has been working at OCI and, our CFO worker and so forth. And that's where I got this idea from. And I think it's important for us to keep an eye on this one. So if you can do that, and it's a little bit tricky because you have to make the scales match on each side. It's a double combo graph. Yeah, you have to lay on top of each other, but that, like I say, at least once a year, we should be looking at this one to make sure that our staffing, I mean, it's very relevant to all the stuff, the staff and financial mix together. This is where they kind of come together.
So I'm laughing and smiling because since you already produced the graph, maybe you could just send it to me.
Yeah.
Because you've already done the scaling. and
Yeah,
everything, it'll just-
I did have to play with it a little bit. It's a little tricky on these things that are side by side, that you have to make, if the scale is off, then it puts the thing wacky, but anyway.
So that's why I was kind of smiling. so.
Yeah, that's how I know.
Thank you.
Now, okay.
I was gonna say, can we take a step back here and just, again, I'm trying to understand the wording here on number 6, continue and increase. That's the word I'm interested in, increase anti-racial practices accountability district-wide. What does it mean by increase?
That is, I think, Director Larson, these are board goals, so, this was the
Yeah.
information that we took down, from previous years. Goals that were provided to us to.
Yeah, I'm
You know,
not,
increase.
Dr. Rose, do you remember, I don't remember discussed around increase particularly,
Increase them across the district.
continue and increase as opposed to continue.
Yeah, I think it was just increased accountability because when
Increase accountability.
I think it's more increased accountability because for a long time, participation was optional. And the goal is to increase district-wide.
So I'll reword that, so it makes
Yeah,
more
it's
sense.
just, it's.
Yeah.
It's hard to understand it.
No, that's great. Thank you for calling that out.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions, we will move to public comment if anyone has anything. I'll give it a moment. Anyone online? Just give them a moment here. Okay, well, if there is no public comment, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So,
Second?
All in favor?
I.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Meeting adjourned.